Right, so we've now finished the 750 kettle, as people like to call it. Lovely bike. This is one of the bikes that come from Josh, which is the classic competition company. It's going to be a raffle bike. Josh wanted us just to check it over basically, and what we found, we showed in the previous video, was the fork seals are leaking. So we've had the forks out of the bike, we've replaced the main fork seals. We've also had both calipers off. We've replaced the seals, so the main seals, the dust seals and the pads. And so they've been serviced. We also showed that the head race bearings are a little bit worn. So once the forks were put back in the bike, I then have adjusted up the head race bearings, so that's correct. Bled all the brakes through now. Everything's good on the front. What else did we find when we were checking over the bike? We needed to adjust the rear chain, a little bit slack, but we did find actually one of the screws on the chain guard was too long. It was actually rubbing on the back of the hub. You can see. Also, the tyre, because these are wider tyres than standard, it had been rubbing up on the chain guard there. So correctly adjusted now, and that's okay. So what's been done so far is the piston has been put back into the caliper body, put the seal in, some brake fluid, lubricate the piston, dust seal back in. Now the sliding plate, which is this bit here, the brake pad sits in the middle of that. Now a little bit of a coating of copper slip around the outside of that, because that needs to move in and out. I think what might have been a bit of an issue is this sliding plate here had been painted obviously, and there's black paint on the inside, and it's making the actual brake pad quite hard to move in and out. So that could be a factor to why it was hanging up a little bit. So we've got new boots on this side, you can see, but there are also new boots on the other side that's in that part of the caliper. So now it's just a case of reassembling here. This pad is just held into this side of the caliper with a crosshead screw. Here you can see both calipers back together. Seal kit's fitted, new pads. At the moment the pistons are well back, got plenty of room to get the disc back into place. So yeah, that's all done. What we'll probably do is we'll charge up the port with brake fluid and make sure we get the fluid coming out the port this side. Then we'll screw up the bleed screw. It just means there's less chance of having so much air in the system when we come to bleed it, because we've tried to keep the oil in the reservoir and in the splitter valve, so it should be easier to do. Right, we're now ready to install the new seal into the fork leg. So that's all cleaned out. What we'll probably do is just put a little bit of WD-40 around there, so when the seal goes in, it'll go nice and easily. We'll just coat the inside of this with some grease as well, and put the circlip in. Then we can put the dust seal carrier back on the dust seal, and then we can reinstall the stanchion, and then we'll put the Allen screw in the bottom that locates into the damper. Right, forks all reassembled. All we've got to do now is put in the correct amount of oil using 10 weight oil. It's 160 cc's of oil per fork leg. I think what's important now, because we've sorted out the forks, we've adjusted the back wheel, sorted out a few things there, we need to give the bike a bit of a shakedown. So we'll take it out for a ride, and then we come back, and if there's anything that needs to be done, we'll do it now. But it is a lovely bike, and I've said to Alex, you know, you don't see them like this very often. And if I was happened to be the person that has a winning ticket for this raffle, I'd be over the moon with a bike like this. Nice thing about the Japanese bikes, when these came out, you still retained a kickstart as well as having an electric start, and both work really well. But we're going to start it up on electric start for you, and you'll hear this running, and it is so smooth. So all we got around this side is fuel tap and choke. Though it has been run this morning, I will put the choke back on. Ignition on, kill switch is on, and press the button. Take it off choke. Lovely runner. This has all been rebuilt, this engine, so whoever is lucky owner of this, just run it in, just take it steady, let it settle down. Just mention, probably people do know, but the lubrication on this, it's not pre-mix in the tank. A bike like this relies on an oil pump, and the oil pump works in conjunction with throttle cable. So when I flip this, you can see this linkage here. This activates the oil pump. Right, we've got two Triumph Scramblers. We've had Scramblers before. I had the 1200, and I believe at the time I had the Speed Twin. But what we got with the big 1200, which is the more off-road Scrambler, seat height is higher. It's more off-road than this one here. This one here is a more lower seat. A bike actually more probably for like road use really, sticking to the roads, and someone's obviously a little bit shorter on the leg. But both beautiful bikes. I love this in the black. I think the finish on these, I said before, I like the style of the bike. I like the presence that you sit upright on these bikes. And I always say about the roads, with the roads being so bad, you don't really want to be too low down anymore. Although, I still like riding that type of bike, but this is a lovely machine. So we're going to have both these bikes here. Alex is going to ride one, I'm going to ride the other. And there'll be a few other people riding these as well, but it gives us a chance to give our evaluation of what these are like. But they look really cool, don't they? Things don't always go the way you want them to go. This bike, we were going out for a photo shoot and some nice riding shots. Didn't quite happen. We were riding off, and we were aware that we need to stop, just check things over. But what we found was we started to lose performance in the bike. Well, performance, I say. Notice a little bit sluggish. And what was happening is the front calipers were hanging on, weren't releasing properly. So a bit of heat got into the discs on both sides. Thought that's strange because we put seal kits in there and the pistons were moving nice and easily, new pistons. If you slacken off the bead screw, fine. It let that pressure go and the front wheel would spin easily because we had a scissor jack underneath here. What we found, and I'm just going to put these caps back on, we've just done a quick bleed on it just to make sure everything's right. We found when we looked at this master cylinder, now we were under the impression that this had been serviced. Well, we took this off and we took the assembly apart and it hadn't. That's all original inside. And what, as people probably know, when you hydraulically push oil down the pipe, when you release the lever, the oil will come back and goes through a second port, comes back into the reservoir. And you know when you take the cap off, you pull your lever in, let it go, you get bubbles coming up inside. Well, that's the oil coming back to the reservoir. That wasn't happening. So what really was happening was you pressurize this oil line here, and there was no oil coming back. So it was just like a hydraulic jack the whole time. It got pressure on the other side of the pad against the disc. No way of letting that pressure off, and that's why it's hanging on. So we've overhauled this, we cleaned this out because the return port was blocked and the piston, we've got some bits on the bench we'll show you in a moment, was in quite a state. So it's got a new seal kit. We had to do a few things to that to get it right. And now it's fine. So it's down to Alex now to hopefully get some nice riding shots tomorrow if the weather's nice. He can get out on this. But now it runs really well. We've got a good brake. We're not heating up the front discs at all. And bar being cleaned up, it's ready. So yeah, a bit of extra work today, but it's just one of those things that happens. Things don't always go the way you want them to go, but we have got it sorted now. Here on the bench, we've got the components of the master cylinder. So this is the piston assembly. The boot itself, well, this hadn't been replaced, it's all perished. But when we got the main piston out here, it's not as bad as it was because we cleaned it up a little bit. There's a lot of corrosion around here. This is the external side of it. This is the internal side. The plunger itself is here. Spring like that, and this piece goes in first like that. Well, it's all very corroded up. Inside the reservoir, the two little holes, the return hole, it was blocked, and the body where this piston runs was very corroded. So when we got the new one, it wouldn't go inside, and there are some shots when we had to put it in the lathe and just clean it up a little bit. And we also cleaned up the bore as well. We used a piece of plastic with some very fine wet and dry, and we reamed that out a little bit, so it now works properly. So yeah, it hadn't been done, but it's been done now. And these components here are the caliper parts that we replaced, the dust seals, the main seals. I did wonder at first whether we had a problem with a sticking piston, but you wouldn't have got it because we made sure they were fine, and they were fine. So those are all the components. These are the fork seals we replaced. The pistons, the seals, the pads. These are the boots on the sliding plate. It's got new bead screws. And these are blanking off bolts that we use. When we disconnect oil lines, it's quite a good idea to use something like this. Saves it draining the oil down, and then you've got more bleeding to do at the end. You can keep the fluid in it and stop the air from getting into the system. And the old trick with the grease nipple, it works. Some people use an airline. If you use an airline, I'll be honest with you, if you're blowing a caliper and blowing the piston out with an airline, there's so much pressure there, and when you force that piston out, it will come out at such a rate. You don't want your fingers there. If you're going to do it that way, put loads of rag in the back of it, because I've seen that happen. Someone's done that, it's like a gun going off. It's too much pressure, really. So yeah, put lots of paper or you know, cloth behind it if you're going to do it that way. And yeah, so everything now is done, and we're sending these bits back. They can go back to the customer, and you can see what we've, because we always like to show the parts that we've fitted. So everything is there for view. So now it's down to Alex now to finish it off. He can ride the bike tomorrow, hopefully, and maybe another time we'll get out. Maybe I might get a chance to ride it, I don't know, but it certainly is a lovely bike. So whoever wins that one, you got a lovely bike. It's so smooth, and yeah, best of luck.